Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Anxiety Chats. Today, we have another anonymous story for you, and we are joined by Yelena. Today's story is about how this viewer felt after their dad used their belongings. As always, if you would like to send your anonymous story to us, head to the link in our description, or you can come on the podcast and chat with me in person. So welcome, Yelena. You've been on here before.
Thank you. Yes. Yeah, I had a pleasure. Nice to see you again.
If you've not yet heard Yelena's episode with us, it was just so great. It was one that I learned so much, but I think sometimes in the space of wellness, you can feel like somebody might be preachy or something, but I don't know. But in your case, I just feel it's just all love, all openness and ideas, and it's just so nice. Like your content on Instagram as well is amazing. So thanks for coming on.
Thank you so much. You said my favorite word, love, that kind of energy. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Ooh, I'm excited about today.
Good. We have a lovely story from somebody. It's an anonymous story, so we don't know where they are. I think they're in New York actually, but we don't know anything else except what this story tells us. So I'll go ahead and read it and we can have a little think. Okay, the story's title is My Dad Used My Ice Machine and I Had a Panic Attack. I'm 16 and I struggle with really bad anxiety. I need everything to go perfectly all the time or else I'll have a massive panic attack. So when things are out of order or hell breaks loose, I feel anxious. I'm from New York and my family goes to Florida for the summers. Over summer of 2022, I got into the habit of only drinking ice cold water to cool myself. So when I got home to New York, my mum bought me an ice machine so I could always calm down with cold water. Due to my anxiety, I have also backup ice cubes in the freezer for when my machine runs out. It was really great and I was the only one who used it, until my mum left for a yoga retreat. It was just me, my brother and my dad. Every night when I went to fill up my 3 cups of ice water, I slowly started to notice how much faster my ice was running out. I was frustrated with myself for using so much ice and having to refill the machine all the time, but I just brushed it off. This was until I went into my dad's room to get my AirPods. He had taken one of my cups and used my ice. This sounds so stupid, but I was furious and started crying. I'm very open with my family about my triggers for panic attacks, and my mum and brother always understand, but my dad has really different views on mental health. He doesn't believe in therapy or medication, and he flipped his shit when I started on antidepressants. So when I confronted him about taking my cup and ice, he just laughed in my face and told me that I shouldn't be crying over ice. I tried to explain that one of my triggers was lack of order, but he really didn't care. My brother heard me crying and dragged me out of my dad's room, telling me there was no point and that we would confront him again when my mum came back. She comes back in 3 days and I know she'll be on my side. It's a tricky one. It's like I have been in the situation where I feel like it's silly that I'm experiencing a big emotion towards something that other people see as something so easy or something so mundane. And I imagine and hear that that's what this person was feeling is, I feel silly that this feels like, it's not just about the ice. It's about a lot of things, it sounds like. It sounds like maybe frustration with your dad for not understanding you, which is really hard. And also when you have an idea of exactly how things are going to go and they don't go that way, that can be really hard to manage.
Yeah, I hear you on that one. I can so relate to feeling uncomfortable when things don't go exactly as I want them to be. Some days I'm better than others when I'm already feeling a bit anxious as my baseline, which sounds like the person in this story, that's his reality. Then every little thing, even not being able to find something in the right place, just can tick me off. And it can be very, very small and maybe negligible on any other day detail, but on that specific day, that would be something so hard to absorb and go on. And I feel like for him, it was one of those things. And of course, I really want to point out what you pointed out, the frustration with his dad and just the knowing that he won't be necessarily understanding. Yeah, that probably adds another layer to that as well.
100%. And I'm very lucky that my dad is super understanding. And, I think he'd probably struggle with this. I think if there was something that he saw as something little, he'd maybe still struggle to understand. But I imagine this is a layered situation of, this person also said that when they went on antidepressants, their dad wasn't happy. And, it sounds like there's a lot of miscommunication and maybe this person's dad being stuck in a past where you weren't allowed to talk about it, and he's not moved forward with his child. Obviously we also don't know the dad's story, so there could be more to his story too that makes it harder. On this podcast, there's never a judgment on anybody and their story and their circumstance, including this person's dad, but really want to honor that this person, it's not just about ice, but also, I totally understand that when it's super, super hot, I imagine you get more of this weather than me, but when it's super hot and you have an idea of how much ice you have for the rest of the day, and then it doesn't go that way, I imagine that is quite stressful, actually.
Yeah, definitely. And what you just said about his dad, and that, of course, we don't know him. We don't know what kind of person he is, really, how he grew up, with what kind of ideas about mental health. And but obviously they seem to be different in that sense, that the boy, the person who shared that story, having an experiences that his dad did not necessarily relate to as much, or can. And it's interesting. It makes me think of all of those times when I observe people talking in between each other, and one of them having a bit of a problem of some sorts, feeling this or that way, anxious, depressed, whatnot, and other person doesn't understand and tell them, just get over it, just step out of it. You shouldn't be you shouldn't be feeling that way. And it's because they perhaps don't have an understanding, they don't have a personal experience of what it can be like, and it's hard to relate and hard to see other person's experience from their point of view, that it can be a big thing. And it seems like it wasn't the first time, but at the same time, he has a supportive mother and supportive brother. And I'm a believer that with enough communication, we can help perhaps his father to see his point of view. And I wonder if it's at all possible within their family to have conversations like that. At the same time, I'm just grateful, feeling a lot of gratitude for the fact that his brother and his mom already can connect with him in that way.
Totally. And that was actually a really lovely part of that story, wasn't it? That this person's brother was there, and sibling relationships aren't always plain sailing. And it sounds like the sibling knew exactly what they needed. They needed to be kind of removed and say, when mom gets back, we can sort this out. And that's so nice that their brother was there to support that. It's a really tough one. And do you have, obviously every family is so different, and in some families communication just really is something that is very hard. I've seen it in lots of different people, lots of different families, that communication is just shouting. And if you try to even bring in some calm and some, some conversation that was more, I don't know how you'd even explain it, but like, when the way you're meant to communicate is kind of like, I feel that you did this. That's a type of communication that feels very alien to a lot of people. But do you have any kind of little bits of advice for people that are struggling with communication within their family or relationships or friendships, that could make it a slight adjustment?
Well, of course, I'm thinking back to like my life of in a relationship that I have had, and communications that could have gone better, or what I learned from those ones that could have gone better to do them better next time. Because of course I'm a member of the society, and I then experience miscommunications, particularly in the most intimate relationships, of course, with my family members, with my husband. And so many times, and perhaps that can be a pointer here towards the advice and what I'm going to share, we hear what the other person is saying through our own filter of some sorts, and we react to that understanding that we've formed. Sometimes we don't even have an understanding that we just reacted to something that is partially on us, And let me give you an example. With my husband right now, we have struggled a lot with communication because I say something and that triggers in him his past traumas of some sorts, and then he reacts to that, what he understood me saying. We actually had a moment this morning, and I'm like, wait. Let's pause. I think it's a good one. Instead of getting defensive, which I used to do, I'm like, I didn't mean that. Like, how dare you think that I said that? I would like, oh, wait a minute. It's not me. That's his stuff. And let me find a way not to take it personal and calm down instead of coming back with a reaction that only fuels his reaction, and then he reacts back at me, and here we are, going off about something that didn't have to happen, only to get to the moment of like, oh wait, did you mean this? Oh, did you really mean this? Really, So for that particular situation with this person sharing his story, in terms of the communication, the first thing comes to mind, and perhaps it will somehow connect to the story that I just shared about myself and my husband. One thing that comes to mind is potentially a difficult one to adopt, is to be open to the fact that his father does not necessarily have an ability to understand him fully. And it's not because his father doesn't love him or doesn't care about him. It seems like he just hasn't had an experience of his own that would teach him that things like that can provoke a person a lot, like not having enough ice. And sometimes we seek understanding from people who don't necessarily, who are not in a position to provide it to start with. And it's not because we are flawed or something wrong with us. It's their personal filters or lack of them, or lack of the experience that speaking right now. And we can take it as them being uncaring. And of course, it does come across that way from, if we look at how his father responded, that he just doesn't get it, and that's the core of it all. He perhaps just doesn't get it, but doesn't mean that he doesn't love his son and all of that. And it's interesting to be able to balance those things at the same time. We can love the person and not being able to relate to them at the same time. And because we are unable to relate, we can inadvertently hurt them by our communication in the moment. And I think in my case is sometimes I take things very personally from my husband because they remind me of how I'm sorry, I'm going to throw my older brother under the bus, speaking about siblings relationship, would talk to me in a bit of a condescending way. Maybe I just took it that way because I'm 8 years younger than him. And he always saw me as a little silly sister that needs to be educated and told what to do. But from that point on, when I'm told certain things in a specific tone of voice, and maybe I'm just projecting that tone of voice on the person, I take it very personally. It just throws me back into that time. And I came to realize that that reaction reminded this is where it's coming from. And I had to explain it to my husband so he can relate to me and not overreact when he sees me like a deer in a headlight when he says something in a weird way to me. So we don't go further than that. So perhaps, and I guess one more thing I want to add is that I learned to accept the fact that my husband might not necessarily being able to relate to me 100%, but he still loves me, and I know this. And as long as, and that's another thing, maybe a little trickier when you are in child-parent relationship because they're not as equal, let's say, is to communicate how you feel. Because in a partner relationship, I feel like it's my obligation to tell him this, what just happened, so we don't have to go there again. And I have to communicate, otherwise he will never learn. And I can see that having an honest one-on-one conversation may be very helpful for the father and the son to come together and have that. So being able to continue speaking up for yourself and how you feel, and at the same time, as best as you can, letting go of very understandable need to be understood by the other person at that moment. Yeah, thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. 100%, like everything you just said, absolutely, completely agree with that. It's hopefully these two people can have a sit down and calmly explain to each other, because also bearing in mind this person who wrote the story is 16, and without wanting to sound patronising at all, that's still young, and there's still lots of learning to do on both parts, it sounds like. But at 16, I was also struggling with mental health problems, and I can tell you now that while I still struggle, I'm definitely very different when I was 16. And I kind of just remembered as well, when thinking about this, when I was younger, probably around 16, maybe slightly younger, and we had people coming over to stay at my parents' house. This sounds really silly too, but I would make my mum set up a bed on the floor next to my bed I already slept in, just in case I needed another option. And I don't really know what the psychology behind that was, but that's what I needed to feel safe. And I'm imagining how that might have sounded to other people, and I'm imagining what would happen if one day my mum said, no, I'm not doing that, or somebody else took that bed. It was important to me to have that. And, you know, that was something that just came up during the story, because I was roughly the same age as this person, and it was something that didn't make any sense at all. I had a bed, I was comfy in it, but that's what I needed to feel safe. And so needing this ice to feel safe, that's also okay. And also we can never, unfortunately, control the way other people react or other people's emotions. And that's something I think all of us would really like to be able to do at times, is, you know, say like, I actually really want to be able to make you not do that. But that's often not the case. And so I think being able to, as much as you can, control how you react. We're not always obviously good at that. We all have moments of frustration and anger and anxiety and all of these things that are normal human parts of us. But that made me feel a lot better when I realised somebody said to me, you can't control the way other people react, but you can control the way you react. And also that you're not responsible for the way somebody else reacts. You're only responsible for how you react. That took a load off me at that time. Yeah.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that. I'm still learning this, not taking what other people say personally and not taking their responsibility away from their own, how they express themselves, and not making it mine. It's work in progress, that's for sure. And I really also enjoy what you said about feeling safe and what we need to feel safe. Each one of us is different. And what I'm noticing from what you just shared about yourself and how he shares about how he came to use eyes in that very specific way to help him feeling safety in his life is that when we come across someone who has a request that we don't necessarily can relate to or connect with, we don't have to. We don't have to connect to their request to make space for it. That's what it seems like perhaps his mom is doing, maybe his brother, maybe they can relate, maybe they can relate in their own way. But at the same time, even if they were not relating, at least they can make that space for him to be what he is and be with it and say, okay, that's just what works for you at this very moment. And we'll go along with that to help you with that safety.
That is so true. I think all of us can take a little bit of that with us, hopefully. There's definitely probably parts of me that also needs to do that, and we don't always need to understand exactly how someone's feeling or why they're feeling that way. I know with the bed on my floor, my parents probably were like, what's this all about? But they didn't really ask. They just said, okay. They set up the bed and I felt safer. And it sounds like that's what this person would like more of from their dad is, you don't really need to get it, but I'd like you to respect it. And maybe some more communication on if that's possible. Obviously, we don't know this. We only get a limited story, obviously, in these scenarios. So, there's so many more questions I'm sure we both have, and maybe there's more to it too. But I really want to thank this person for sharing this very vulnerable story with us, because it's not easy, and they're 16, and it's really cool to be vulnerable and know yourself. That's what I'm really thinking is so positive from this story. They know themselves, they're standing up for themselves, all things that are hard to do, and I think that's really impressive.
Yes, yeah, I totally agree with you. Thinking back very quickly right now of myself being 16, what a time it was. I really agree with you on everything you just said. And yeah, the ability to be self-aware and also be brave enough to share, regardless of what kind of, voices in terms of oh, this is not important, this is whatever we can have at that age, at any age, still being able to put it out there, because I'm sure we can relate to that. You relate to that, I relate to that, and so many other people can relate to that. And this is how we normalize things like this and say no worries, that's all human nature. We just gotta communicate and spread the word so we can relate to that as a society, and maybe more people, including this person's father, can hear stories like this and they can understand that, oh wow, that's actually a thing. that's
absolutely
a thing. Thank you.
Well, I mean, in an ideal world, the person that sent this story in could maybe send it to their dad, this podcast episode, if that was something that they were able to do, because their dad would hear that we are not judging. We are maybe suggesting a more open space, if he can manage that, to maybe look in himself and see why he's struggling with his child's desire for, more safety and support. But without judgment, only with positivity. Thank you so much, Yelena, for coming on. We will have the links to all of her really lovely stuff if you've enjoyed listening to Yelena. She's just really great. You've been the perfect person to have on today, so thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks so much to everybody that's listened today as well, and hopefully you all have a lovely rest of your day, and we will see you very soon. Goodbye.
Bye.